President Biden also said his administration will be imposing new sanctions on Russia. Joining us now, Special Advisor at the White House National Security Council, Matt Miller. Good to have you with us, Matt. President Biden was talking about Ukrainians getting the weapons they need. Will they? Do they have them now?
They do, and in fact, we continue to flow new weapon systems in every day. We have provided, more than $1.6 billion of security assistance to Ukraine just since the conflict began, over $2 billion since President Biden was elected to office, and we continue to identify and facilitate the transfer of new systems every day. Not just the Javelin missiles that the Ukrainians have been using to such great effect to destroy Russian tanks on the battlefield, not just the Stingers, but also long-range air defense systems. When the president went to Brussels 2 weeks ago, he talked to our NATO allies and urged them to provide coastal defense systems to the Ukrainians, something that President Zelensky explicitly asked for. And last week, the United Kingdom announced in response to that request that those systems would be provided. So we continue to work with the Ukrainians to identify new weapons capabilities and get them delivered to them on the ground so they can use them in the fight against the Russians.
So, Matt, General McCaffrey was on earlier, and he said, we believe correctly, that this war has entered a new phase with the Russians leaving the Kyiv area and repositioning, and says that this is a unique moment, a unique opportunity for the Ukrainians. Talked about the importance of getting tanks in there, talked about the importance of anti-ship systems in there, anti-ship missiles. Are we seeing an increase in not only the speed of the weapons going in there, but also the type of weapons that are going in?
We are, Joe. In fact, we agree with General McCaffrey. Jake Sullivan, the president's national security advisor, said that from the White House podium yesterday, that what we are seeing is the Russians withdrawing from Kyiv, withdrawing from the north, and redeploying to launch a ferocious assault on the east. We expect them to deploy dozens of battalion tactical groups constituting tens of thousands of Russian soldiers to try to surround the Ukrainian forces there and launch a new phase of this war. So we are continuing to flow new types of security assistance. And one thing I will say about this, there are types of security assistance that we talk about. When everyone sees Javelin missiles being used to destroy Russian tanks on social media, there's no point of us trying to hide the ball about what we're providing. And there are other types of security assistance that we don't talk about, either because our allies don't want to disclose that they provided those weapons capabilities to the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainians themselves want to keep some bit of operational security and not telegraph exactly to the Russians what we're providing. You will see reports of things that we're providing that we don't confirm, but I can assure you that we are providing new weapons capabilities to the Ukrainian army almost every day.
Hey, Matt, good morning. Jonathan Lemire, good to see you. We heard from the president yesterday suggest that Vladimir Putin should stand trial for war crimes, he and perhaps some of his top aides. How possibly could that come about? And secondly, many of those on the ground in Ukraine are using the term genocide to describe what is happening there in the suburbs of Kyiv. But the administration pointedly is not doing so yet. Tell us why.
So with respect to genocide specifically, that is a formal legal determination. It takes a great deal of evidence. It takes a great deal of review. We've just begun to collect evidence of what happened in Bucha, although we can see with our own eyes the videos of what happened. It's apparent that there were mass atrocities. It's apparent to us that there were war crimes committed, as the president said. So we will go through the process that the State Department conducts to assess whether it was officially genocide, but that's something that will take some time. I will say, whatever name you call what happened in Bucha, it's apparent that it was a mass atrocity, and that's why we are so committed both to holding the Russians accountable, to holding the Russian military and the Russian leadership accountable, and continuing to flow military assistance in so the Ukrainians can defend themselves in the face of these atrocities. With respect to any trial, what I can say about that is we continue to discuss with our allies, with our partners, with the Ukrainians, what any kind of accountability mechanism will look like. There are another number of potential avenues available to us. We're going to discuss that with all of our allies. There are things that have been deployed in the past. But in the meantime, I think people should understand that that type of accountability mechanism is something that would come down the road. I think in the meantime, we can't lose focus of the fight that is immediately in front of us, the fight that the Ukrainians are conducting to defend their country every day. And so that's why kind of the holding them accountable through trials is a tomorrow or a down the road issue. Getting military assistance into the Ukrainians so they can defend themselves is a today issue that we are focused on really every day here at the White House. House.
Matt, good morning. You've just laid out all the assistance that the United States has provided to Ukraine in this fight, billions of dollars in aid with more to come down the road. And yet we expect to hear again from President Zelensky today before the UN Security Council a plea to the West, including to the United States, to do more. We know there are things the United States says it will not do, like create a no-fly zone. But what is President Biden's answer in their conversations to President Zelensky, who says, thank you for what you've done, but I need much more if we're going to push the Russians out?
Look, we very much understand where President Zelensky is coming from. I think anyone who has seen his country attacked would act exactly the same way as he has done. And so what we've tried to do, both in our conversations with President Zelensky and in our conversations at all levels of the government, from our government to their government, is to identify the security assistance, the weapons, the arms that we think would be most effective, and that the Ukrainians are trained and know how to use, and that we can get into the country quickly and they can deploy into the battlefield quickly without taking weeks or months to having to train up on new systems. We have tried to work through their lists. I mean, I can tell you, we get lists from the Ukrainians, and we take a look at those lists, and we go through them kind of with some level of granularity, both here at the White House and at the Pentagon. In some cases, we figure out what are the systems we can provide. In other cases, we figure out what are systems that we don't have because they may be Soviet era or Russian systems, but some other allies, either in Europe or around the world, have, and we work to try to facilitate transfers of those systems to the Ukrainians, and at the same time, often try to backfill our allies so they aren't left defenseless. So we will continue to work through that process. It's something we do every day, and I would say I would expect new security assistance announcements to come in the very near future.
Matt, as you know, there's a large element of the Soviet fleet sitting in the Black Sea looking right at Odessa. And Odessa, if it falls, is a critical loss to the future of the Ukrainian economy. Is there, and this is a multi-front war, we all understand that, but is there a priority in getting weapon systems into Odessa to protect Odessa from falling?
There is. I can tell you, I mentioned a minute ago that one of the things the president did when he was in Brussels some 12 days ago now, at President Zelensky's request, was to try to identify coastal defense systems that we could get to the Ukrainians to defend their cities along the coast. We looked in our inventory. We found that there weren't coastal defense systems that were an exact match that we thought would be effective and that we could get in quickly. And so we talked to our allies and partners to try to identify other coastal defense systems. And as the United Kingdom announced last week, those coastal defense systems are being provided to Ukraine now.
It's at the White House National Security Council. Matt Miller, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.